And there we go. You didn't need to hear it a second time, but here we go. That was my bad, by the way, my producer. I pushed that loop button. So sorry about that. All right, here we are. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. And here we are. We're welcome in Fresh Grill Kitchen, Stony Plain. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I hope people can hear me because this is the audio that I'll have for them. But there we go. We're ready to go. And the food professor is here. He is here. So we're very excited to have him. We're going to get into some of the details about some of the agricultural and agri-food stuff that goes on here in Alberta. And let me go ahead and introduce him. Dr. Charlebois, that's not how you say it. That's how I say it. But he has a different way of saying it, which is a correct way, but we'll get to it in the end. He's a renowned food distribution and policy expert from Dalhousie University and the senior director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab. And what I brought him on for was Bill C-293, because it's a very important bill that touched agri-food. It was the preparedness pandemic or plandemic preparedness bill that was being passed. And we got to the second reading before Justin resigned and prorogued Parliament. Now, to keep in mind for everybody, that doesn't mean it's off the tape. It's severely hurt now. It's got to restart at the first reading and go through the whole process because all committees get disbanded when it's prorogued. And it won't be touched until we come back until May or March 21st at the earliest. So do pay attention to the fact that it's still on the table. It's not gone. And I'm being asked to talk louder. So I'm going to try to talk louder. Hopefully I'm not too loud for everybody. But this bill can still happen. They put a lot of work into it. It was in order to give the government a whole bunch of powers if they declared an emergency around a pandemic. They would be controlling our food, medical, financial, even where you could travel and stuff like that. But the most important part here was the control of the food supply. And this is what Dr. Charlebois is here to talk to us about. And we get to talk about some Trump stuff, so it's new relations with Canada, how that's going to impact it. And we'll take it from there. So thank you very much. I see we have an audience, and beautiful audience. This is a great place to be. So if you can come to Stony Plain, please do. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Dr. Charlebois. I don't have to push any buttons. That was fantastic.
I don't have to push any buttons either. So there you go.
And you're not in a restaurant, so you're in your cozy home. And I believe you're on the East Coast.
That's right. I'm in my home studio tonight. It is 9 o'clock local here. It's a bit later. And I am in Halifax, beautiful Halifax. I've been living here for about almost 10 years now. But I used to live in Guelph. And before that, I was actually in the prairies with my family in Saskatchewan. And so I've been doing the work I do right now for almost 25 years. And so I've been dealing with media for 25 years. There's been some up and downs for sure. But the last 5 years have been incredibly busy because more people have actually focused on food. They quickly realize that food is a really big component of our lives. We saw that with the pandemic, of course, and with Ukraine, supply chains and everything else. Every year there seems to be something disrupting our food systems, compelling people to think differently about food in general. So we're always trying to provide answers to people as much as possible.
A lot of people think that food just comes from a grocery store, but here in Alberta, we know no farmers, no food. Right.
I would say, you know, when I go to Alberta, and I'm actually back in the province at the end of the month, I do interact with a much more, I would say, aware and educated public when it comes to food systems. I don't want to downgrade Ontario or Quebec or even here in Nova Scotia, but in Alberta there is this connection. There's an inherent connection between urban centers and rural communities. In most provinces, there is a huge rural-urban divide. I would say that there's probably still a urban-rural divide in Alberta, but it's not as obvious. It's not as pronounced as in other provinces, like right next door in Saskatchewan. You just look at the last provincial election. It's basically the cities against rural communities. That's basically what the government looks like now. But in Alberta, it's a bit more nuanced.
Well, that's a good way to put it. A little bit more nuanced, but we definitely know where the food comes from. We love our beef out here. We know where our energy comes from. And a lot of this is being touched on with the Bill 293.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your credentials, where you came from, and then we'll get into this conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've been doing some research on food distribution and policy for 25 years. And at the lab here, we tend to work with governments. We've worked in the past with the Bank of Canada, the Auditor General of Canada, most provinces, including Alberta, on many files. We're mandated to do some research on different topics. Right now, we have 4 key projects on the go at the lab, and we have about 15 people working on these projects. And of course, the output, in terms of output, it's always about publishing scientific literature. And so that's the key for us. And of course, my job is to actually get that knowledge out there as much as possible through media, and of course through lovely podcasts like yours.
Well, thank you very much for giving us a little credit there. A lovely podcast like that. I'm very happy to you. Okay, so a lot of the Canadians don't know that there's a lot of regulation around food. Like, for example, dairy. Something that you can't get is raw milk. Is this a subject you're familiar with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the marketing boards were one of my first love. Actually, the first ever paper I published was on marketing boards in Canada, the history of it. So I basically very early on, I gained a very important appreciation for why we have these marketing boards in Canada, including supply management. And it's all about countervailing power. It's about protecting farmers and whatnot. And so the quota system really wasn't an accident. It was designed to protect family farms as much as possible. And so, and of course, we're north of a superpower called the United States. And if we don't really strategically think about agricultural production, we can actually get hit pretty hard, pretty quickly. And so that's why some protection is convenient, but we over the years we've grown our sentiment to seek for protection has grown, and that's not always healthy. And so right now, I would say that the supply management regime has become a political weapon for certain farmers. And I do want to distinguish 2 things. You have boards and you have farmers. Farmers aren't the problem. No. Boards are political machines. And those are the ones, the boards are the ones that we get messages from. And of course, the role of boards is to influence policy and influence politicians as much as possible. And most of the time, farmers are the victims as much as they are benefactors of the system itself. So we need to distinguish both, but I do think the biggest problem in supply management are boards. They're incredibly powerful. They're incredibly resourceful, and they actually provide really some bad information to the public, to politicians. And it misleads a lot of people. That leads to bad policy and bad decisions in government. And so I've been trying to, for the last 25 years, I've been trying to convey to the public that certain things are absolutely wrong, but it's been tough. It's been tough because I'm one, and I'm up against a machine that has $170 million to spend on legal advice, marketing, everything. So, I mean, the dairy sector is a monster, really. And so going up against that monster, politicians can't afford to do that. You can't afford to do that. You're not tenured. I'm tenured. I'm protected. So I can do that on behalf of Canadians.
Now, boards are a lot like a union where there's only one. So you don't have like boards competing. There's no open market on boards. There's just one for the region, correct?
If you look at dairy, and we'll stick to dairy because dairy is 80% of supply management, basically, when you look at cash receipts. Each province will have a board. Okay, so in Alberta, you have Alberta Milk. So Alberta Milk is responsible to issue quotas based on domestic demand. Okay. At the federal level, you have the Canadian Dairy Commission responsible for setting prices, fair prices for farmers. And provincial boards will see the commission's recommendations as guidance in terms of how to compensate farmers in their own region. That's kind of how it works in general. And of course, you have tariffs on imports. So if you're in the United States and you want to import butter from the United States to Canada, you're up against a 320% tariff. And this is why Mr. Trump is always pointing fingers at dairy, because Canada is a highly protected market. So most of the dairy products we eat in Canada are made in Canada, and most Canadians don't mind that. Challenge is that it doesn't bring competition, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee Canadians quality. That's the thing. So it provides security because we have something to eat, but it doesn't necessarily provide quality. And the Buttergate incident 3 years ago is a good example of that, where we saw we discovered that many dairy farmers, including many of them in Alberta, by the way, 90% of dairy farmers in Alberta were using palmite, which is a palm oil derivative to feed cows, which actually made butterfat different. And when you actually made butter couldn't melt or couldn't get soft at room temperature. And it's still the case today. So the butter that we have in Canada is not very good because of the lack of monitoring and how we monitor the quality of the butterfat and fluid milk coming out or leaving farms in general.
What was the catalyst for the raw milk issue? Like, why did we regulate raw milk, and why is it something we can't get? I know that they went through a process, but what was there a catalyst? Did a whole bunch of people get sick, or was it a bunch of scientists that said this is a better way to do it? Like, how did we start with that one?
Well, food safety was really the fear factor. So I grew up working on dairy farms and drank raw milk during my youth, and I was fine. I am fine, and a lot of people have actually done the same thing. I think over the years, basically, and that was back in the 90s, we basically decided that to keep things as safe as possible, and of course, the commercialization of milk in Canada is highly not subsidized, but surveilled. And so that's why I think they felt it was prudent to regulate raw milk as much as possible and to avoid any accidents. As you can imagine, Jason, you get one person getting sick from raw milk. It doesn't look good on the dairy sector at all. It will actually discourage people from drinking milk. So there was a strong food safety argument, but the biggest argument I think is for the sector's image in general. But now, I mean, we did discover in recent months, we did publish a very, very important study, myself along with two colleagues from McGill University in Montreal, showing that in the last 10 years, we've dumped over 6 billion liters of milk in Canada. And so wondering, what else can we do? How can we avoid the waste? And of course, one of the solutions we provided in the paper was to legalize raw milk. But of course, the reaction from boards, not farmers, but
Right.
boards, was pretty quick in saying that the study was unfounded, it was flawed, and commercializing raw milk is a bad idea. So that's what boards do. They come out and they basically tell Canadians this is how it should be, and you shouldn't be asking questions at all.
So did you say 6 billion liters of milk was poured down a drain?
6 billion with a B. So we actually think that we're wasting anywhere between 600 million to 1 billion liters of milk a year in Canada. Okay. And no one knows that. Do you remember last year in Ontario, a farmer filmed himself dumping 30,000 liters of
Yeah.
milk? That's the reason why we did the study in the first place. My two colleagues from McGill, Benjamin Goldstein and Thomas Elliott, they call me up and say, listen, why are we asking a farmer to dump 30,000 liters of milk? And so we met in Montreal for coffee, and I explained to them the regime. They're both environmental scientists, so they didn't know anything about supply management. So I told them everything I knew, and they said, this is appalling. We need to do something. We need to estimate the amount of milk being wasted. And I said, you can't do that because boards don't disclose anything related to waste. It makes them look bad. But we're able to actually dig deeper into the data and come up with a really rigid estimate.
Was it overproduction, price protection? What was the reason? Do you know?
Well, so first of all, we need to understand that wasting milk is actually, or having a milk surplus is incredibly natural. I mean, cows aren't robots. They just, you can't just put on a tap and they'll stop making milk. That's not how it works. So it's totally understandable that sometimes farmers will actually overproduce. And frankly, if you're paid this much, if you're paid to produce that amount of milk and butterfat, basically you're going to be overshooting a little bit. And that's basically why there's a surplus. And so that's the thing that about the issue of surpluses and milk dumping.
Okay, I'm sorry, we lost your audio for a little bit there. Can you just repeat that last paragraph?
Oh, okay. So
My bad.
can you hear me now?
Yes, it was my mistake. You're good.
Okay. Now. So essentially, there's milk dumping in Canada because, well, farmers they want to get paid, and so they'll overshoot a little bit, and sometimes they overshoot in a decent way, but sometimes they overshoot like dramatically, and so that's why we should expect. The problem that I think, and that's the message we were sending out to a lot of people, is that milk dumping isn't the problem. Not having a plan to deal with milk surpluses is the problem. Gotcha. And we don't have that because we still have boards denying the problem, denying that there is a problem.
What would be some solutions? Did you recommend any?
Yes, absolutely. So the raw milk option is certainly one, but the most important one, I think, is to actually create a strategic reserve at the Canadian Dairy Commission. Right now, did you know, Jason, that Canada has a strategic reserve for butter?
I didn't know that. I knew we had maple syrup, but not butter.
But it's managed by a Crown Corporation you and I own. It's called the Canadian Dairy Commission. And I've always argued, why don't we do the same with milk, fluid milk? And in fluid milk, you have lactose, you have fat, you have sugar. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do with the waste. So why not do something with that and work with industry as much as possible? But there is no appetite because we're not recognizing that there is a problem. And so basically, if you don't recognize there's a problem, why would you talk to stakeholders to build up processing capacity to deal with the surpluses? And that's been the issue for a long time.
Now, before I left Ontario, I kind of remember the U.S. was entering the milk market. I remember commercials on the TV for American milk. Is that still going on in Ontario?
Well, it's it was really in the works for a while, but now it's been halted. Of course, it's incredibly politicized, so they're being very careful. And of course, with the Trump administration, that makes things a little bit more, I would say, delicate. I don't know when you left Ontario, but
2021.
Yeah, so there is a new facility in Kingston that was built, and it's making baby formula, but it's owned by the Chinese. They're actually making baby formula called Nurse, and it's sold actually online. You can actually buy it online. It's actually quite affordable. But initially, it was supposed to actually ship baby formula to the United States and to China as well. But because of some concerns, because basically, why would you take Canadian milk, produce for Canadians, and ship it elsewhere while we're charging taxes on imports on everyone else? Doesn't make sense. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order for us to actually have any sort of moral authority to export anything with milk or butter fat in it.
And do you think we can create a market where raw milk is something that you can buy?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Europe, you can actually buy raw milk from a vending machine. Why not do that here? I mean, it's the thing about boards is that they actually are always reminding Canadians of how dangerous milk can be and how non-Canadian milk can be. So they say many states, I think 22, 23 states actually have legalized raw milk, but that raw milk is no good. In the United States, they actually allow the use of growth hormones for dairy cows. But the reality is that very few dairy farmers actually are using growth hormones, and most of the milk sold to humans in grocery stores come from cows that haven't actually ingested any, haven't been administered any growth hormones at all. And so, but they're always saying, well, if we open up our borders to American dairy products, those products are of lower quality, without any evidence, without any facts, without any tests to actually guarantee Canadians that our products are superior to Americans. So it's a bit rich on their part to say anything against other products coming out of Canada that is produced outside of Canada, to say, well, our products are much better because, you know, our guidelines are much stricter, and you should trust our boards.
Yeah, speaking of guidelines and stricter, let's get into Bill C-293. So you
Yes.
spent a lot of time taking a look at that one. And while it was on the table, what were some of your major concerns with that one?
So actually, you know, before the holidays, I had the pleasure to talk to Nate Erkenshine Schmidt, the sponsor of the bill himself, Bill C-293. But it was on the eve of when he was actually appointed housing minister. And so I won't go into the details of our conversation because it was actually confidential, but I thought it was a really good conversation. But I did express my concerns about his own bill. But now, since Parliament has been prorogued, as you explained earlier, chances are that bill will never see the light of day. I don't think it will ever become law ever again. And perhaps Nate, if he's reelected, he may actually reintroduce it through a new Parliament. But it's highly doubtful because the bill itself, Bill C-293, is a private member's bill, and typically private members' bill don't survive the first or the second reading in the lower chamber. But Parliament was so dysfunctional that everything went through like butter, and including Bill 293 and 282, by the way, same thing. So with 293, it went through Parliament and it was at Senate, and I was getting phone calls from senators. A couple of senators actually called me and asked me, Sylvain, have you looked at Bill C-293? And I was back in the summer. And I said, no, I haven't really looked at it in details. Well, I'll send it to you and tell me what you think. So I read it, and no, it's about pandemic preparedness. Like, who's against pandemic preparedness? I mean, who would want to, like, normally governments should prepare for the next pandemic. So, but when you start reading the bill, it covers everything and tries to control everything. And my section, the section about food, is section L. And section L is an absolute overreach overreach. So there are two articles in Section L that really were problematic. One, it basically states that we should, in case of a pandemic, and even before, okay, because it's pandemic preparedness, it could happen anytime. So it allowed governments to de-risk animal protein production. Yeah.
Okay, explain that
And
one.
and
De-risk
the
animal protein production.
well, basically, it can mean a lot of things. It can mean, say, I don't know, let's shut down a bunch of processing facilities because they're deemed too dangerous and they can spread nasty viruses, as an example. And two, and this is that's the one article that really got me, because it was pretty clear what Nate was trying to accomplish here. It said to promote alternative proteins to Canadians. Promote alternative proteins to Canadians. So it basically meant, let's actually encourage Canadians to eat other things than meat or animal proteins. So to me, that was, I was troubled by Section L for two reasons. One, I think it was an overreach. It wasn't necessary. I think the government's job when it comes to pandemics and crisis is to support our livestock industry, not to kill it. That's one thing. And two, what kind of government is trying to dictate how people should eat? What kind of government should dictate how people should eat? That is incredibly troubling when you think about it. And that was Bill C-293, which I called Canada's Vegan Act. I lost your audio there. I can't hear you. I do not hear you for some reason.
Hi there. Sorry, Dr. Charlebois. Jason's audio just cut off. So we're just trying to fix it for him.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, he's found it. He'll fix it.
There, I should be back now.
Yes, you are.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. We're live and we're playing around with the audio, so I'll stop doing that.
No problem.
I'm not even sure where we left off there.
I basically was claiming that this bill was absolutely unacceptable because it was basically dictating how people should be eating, what kind of proteins you should be eating. And I've never seen that ever before in my entire life. And that's why senators were wondering, what are we supposed to do with this bill? And it's coming from Parliament, well-intentioned beings elected by the people telling us this is what we need to consider. So I would say that Senate was really stuck between a rock and a hard place for a while. So proroguing Parliament was really, really a good idea. I think the best idea was an election, but at least we're pausing right now, which I was considering to be a very, very chaotic situation.
Okay, so the pandemic preparedness, they're talking about alternate proteins. Why would that be two things that would be connected? Are they trying to imply that maybe the food supply might be part of the pandemic, like swine flu or bird flu or something like that? Like, why are those connected? Did you kind of see why they may have done that?
They've made the connection between the livestock industry and how critical it is in terms of conduits and spreading an outbreak, essentially. And it's true. It is true. There are significantly more risks related to the livestock industry when it comes to flus, and we're seeing it right now as we speak with the avian flu. Right. There's no denying about that, but it's not an excuse to kill an industry. It's just Bill C-290 would have given the power to Ottawa to basically decide to shut down an entire sector. If it wanted to, it could have done that. Because it was so vague and so open that it was like that. And of course, the other part of the article or the section was to actually promote alternative proteins to Canadians, because since we just kill the livestock industry, since they're the reason why we're getting sick, let's actually promote and encourage you to eat proteins that are much safer for you. And by the way, it's better for the environment as well. I mean, come on. Like, seriously, it was really just an overreach, and it was, I think, irresponsible.
Now, I'm getting a whole bunch of reports out of the US that egg supplies are almost gone. Like, quite a few grocery stores down there, it's almost impossible to get eggs now. What do you think's going on with that? Is this related to the avian flu?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. The avian flu is really hitting the United States very hard right now, which is why I think it's important to recognize that there are significant risks. I mean, yes, absolutely. It's how you deal with risks. And so this is the one thing that I've been saying a lot. So I've been really critical of supply management when it comes to dairy, but when it comes to poultry and eggs, I would say that supply management has actually helped our cause in Canada, because you see, with supply management, producers talk to each other. They share information. They're not competing against each other. And that allows them to really strategize and plan ahead, especially when it comes to biosecurity. And so that's why I think that Canada has performed quite well with the avian flu compared to the United States over the last few years. And so are we going to see some shortages in Canada? It's highly, highly doubtful, because boards will actually talk to each other. But prices are impacted, though. I mean, if you look at BC, for example, they've slaughtered over 900,000 birds now. They're going to surpass 1 million. Probably, we just discovered the avian flu in 8 or 9 farms in Ontario. And that's going to impact the sector, of course. But the sector is resilient. It takes about 10 weeks to recover. But it will have an impact on prices on both chicken and eggs eventually. We always see that. Now, farmers boards will say, so people don't panic, no, it won't affect prices. We're fine. We're better than the Americans. That's not true. Because what we see several months later, so they keep it at bay for a while. If the avian flu hits like right now in January, February, I would say probably in August, September, we'll see price hikes again.
Okay, we'll pay attention to that one. Now, maybe
that's what I do for a living, Jason.
Yeah, well, we'll turn into you again. We'll have you back. Yeah. Now, growing up, I do not remember having problems like this. I remember mad cow disease over in the UK, but I don't remember a lot of these things like swine flu or avian flu or anything like that. Is this something I just wasn't noticing, or is it happening more and more recently?
We're better at tracing these diseases, I think. They've always been around. We're just better at it. And of course, to get better at it, you need to share information, and the reporting is there, clearly there. And so I'm a big fan of risk communication. I think people need to know. And right now, people are hearing about the avian flu. Are they concerned about the avian flu? I don't think so. I don't see any panic. I mean, once in a while, I'll get a comment or I'll get a question. Is the avian flu making my meat unsafe or things like that? I mean, and of course, it's always an opportunity to actually explain to people, no, it's not. It's not a food safety issue for humans, etc. But I just think that we've gotten better at it. The mad cow situation was really, I think, a game-changing crisis for Canada, because Black Wednesday was in 1997 in the UK. They slaughtered over 4 million heads of cattle. Canada did nothing to actually change anything. The ruminant to ruminant feed policy, the SRMs, all that stuff, nothing happened. They were looking at the UK and said, well, that's a UK issue. It would never happen in Canada. And they started to test animals in Canada because, they thought it was a good idea. And all of a sudden, in 2003, we saw our first native case, and that's when things got really tricky. And since then, I think the CFIA in particular, which was fairly new in those days, but now I think the CFIA has matured into a very well. I'm not so critical of the CFIA because the CFIA is learning from its mistake a lot more now, and that's why I'm reassured by some of the things that I'm seeing when it comes to the avian flu or other diseases.
Okay, and I've also noticed that there's a lot more farmers markets over the last 10 years or so. Was I not paying attention, or does it seem like there's a lot more farm to fork and that kind of stuff going on where people want farmers markets?
No, the number of you're right. I mean, the number of farmers markets have actually gone up, and how it's organized. You have associations, and you have programs to promote farmers markets as much as possible. There is this myth out there saying, well, if you go to farmers markets, you have to pay the price. There's always a premium at farmers markets. That's not always the case. It depends on the farmers markets. It depends at what time you show up. It depends on a bunch of reasons. Now, of course, some farmers markets are elitist, I'll admit. I mean, St. Lawrence Market in Toronto is a good example of that.
Yeah.
You can't go in without, signing on a mortgage or something to buy meat but there are some really good farmers markets that are available and quite democratized, to be honest, available and accessible for anyone, really.
And what do you think is going on there? A bit of a change of habits for Canadians? Farmers want to reach out more. They need to make more money. What do you think is happening there?
Well, I mean, I think people want to connect. People want to know the story behind their food. We don't go to farmers market every week because we can't afford it. But I would say that once a month, every 6 weeks, we go to farmers markets, and frankly, the conversation that we have with people are just different. At the grocery store, let's face it, at the grocery store, you don't want to talk to anyone really. I mean, you just go in, you do your stuff, and then you get out. Sometimes you want to take some time and buy different products, different things, and you want to take your time as much as possible. And so I think that's what people are looking for way more than say 10 or 15 years ago. People want to connect, and they want to understand what's happening as much as possible.
And another trend that I noticed before leaving Ontario was people were having chickens in their backyard and pigs and stuff like that, even in urban areas, to the point where they started to bring in regulations to limit the number of chickens and stuff like that. Have you noticed that trend as well? More and more people want to raise their own chickens and pigs.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that because you need to know what you're doing, and some people actually don't know what they're doing, and that becomes a problem, especially in light of the avian flu, for example, in chickens. But I know I have friends who have chickens in their backyard. In fact, I have one friend, he has spent thousands and thousands of dollars for a chicken coop that looks like a spa for chicken. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And it makes him happy. And if he's happy, then that's great. I mean, that's what he wants. He wants to connect. He wants his own eggs, and that's great. I mean, that's if that's what that's what needed for someone in their lives. That's fine. But I do think that over time we're gonna have to think about, like, how do we focus on urban agriculture and make it safe for everyone. Because I've always believed that urban agriculture does have an education role. So kids know that carrots don't grow on trees. They grow in the ground, for example, and tomato plants look like this and squash plants look like that. I think it's important so kids can connect as much as possible. Gardens at schools, I think, critical, but the problem is that school in summer is off, and Canada, your growing season is very, very, very small. So there's not much you can do there.
Yeah, we homeschool and we have a homestead, so we do the chicken thing. We didn't do it this year because we've been so busy with the show. It's a lot of work. You can't leave them. You got to keep feeding them.
Oh no, absolutely, and that's what people notice is that once you have livestock, I mean, basically over Christmas we were hosting friends, and one of them actually had chickens, and at the last minute he couldn't come because of a problem that he had with the rooster. And so, I mean, all of a sudden it was a crisis, and totally understandable. He was able to join us the next day, but I mean, that's the kind of things you have to accept when you actually have livestock on your land.
Yeah, it kind of keeps us homesteaded, doesn't it? We have to stay there and take care of them. And now we're going to talk about adding some goats as well.
Well,
So
I
don't know.
work when I was a kid. I worked for dairy farms in my hometown, and I mean, we're criticizing dairy farming and the dairy sector, but dairy farming is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and
Every day?
but yeah, it's every day. Although I have visited dairy farms in recent years, and they're very different now. I mean, some of them are my goodness, mansions. It's so clean. The barn is really, I mean, I actually visited some in just west of Toronto, and some of them are pretty impressive. I mean, the farmer can actually operate in the entire barn in a room filled with computers. And cows don't get to interact with humans at all. They just walk around. They get milk when they want to. It wasn't like that in my day. So it's less work, but you still, I mean, you got millions of dollars of inventory. So cows, I mean, these cows are pretty precious. And so you want to take care of them, and you're always like a couple of minutes away from seeing a disaster. So you always want to be there. It's like having a family. I mean, when you have children, we have 4 children at home. 2 of them have left the house. We're still worried about them. That's what we do as parents. And so it's the same for farmers.
Yeah, I got one more question for you, and then we got one from the audience. So we'll get that ready for you.
Sure, absolutely.
Factory farming seems to be another one of these trends. So the smaller farms are kind of being bought out or losing their land, and they're being consolidated into much larger farms.
Yep.
Is that trend going to continue? And have you seen it for the last 20 years or so?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. So Canada actually loses anywhere between 4 to 5% of farms every year. It's a worldwide trend. It's not just in Canada, but it's worldwide. And farming is difficult. Not everyone actually wants. So there are hobby farmers out there leaving the city to go in a countryside. They want to. It's a lifestyle choice, and that's great. But for commercial farming, that's not what they want to do. They just want they want a lifestyle. That's really what's happening there. But when it comes to farming, I don't necessarily like the term industrialized farming, because to me, what's happening in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba is needed, because you want farmers to be business folks. You want farmers to be well equipped to produce well, to be sustainable. We're talking about sustainability a whole lot more, the use of fertilizers, and how do you actually efficiently use the chemicals to actually increase yields. Well, the only way to do it is to actually be well resourced, and smaller farms aren't as well resourced. Right now, most farmers in Canada are business folks, savvy business folks, and they know what they're doing. And that's what you want. You don't want a farmer that is inefficient. You want farming to be efficient as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that one right after this question, because the fertilizer issue, the water issue that they're bringing down for my neighbors, they're basically telling my neighbors they don't know what they're doing. There needs to be some other guidance. So we'll get to that one in a second, but let me bring this question in. All right, go ahead, Patch. Oh, let's get you unmuted. There you go.
Yes, we had a question from the audience. Why is carrageenan put in milk?
Carrageen? Is it?
Carrageen. Yes.
Can you spell that, please?
CARROGENAN.
I'm sorry, but I don't know. I don't know what that is.
GEEEN.
It's a preservative, apparently. Carrageenan? No?
I'm not aware whether farmers it's not a feed additive, is it? It's incorporated
Yes,
in
they're saying
milk.
it is a feed additive. Yes.
It's a feed additive. Okay, it's not to reduce methane, is there? Is it?
I don't know. Maybe we'll have to bring them on. It's for processor? A process additive.
Yeah, it's probably in processing. So I'm not that familiar about some of the ingredients that they actually would use in processing. Some of
Okay,
it,
fair
some of
enough.
it is not even labeled. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really answer the question.
Nope, fair enough. Do we have another one? Okay. Thank you very much. All right, back to the
Very
show.
technical
Oh.
question. That's good.
We have the best people. We're surrounded by farmers. We're in Stony Plain. This matters to them. And this is
That's
why
right.
they're here hanging out with us today.
I'm sure
So
at
back-
6 o'clock in where you are, a lot of people are drinking milk.
Yeah, it could be. No raw milk, right? Hint,
Yeah,
hint.
exactly.
But just before that question, we were getting into fertilizer. Oh, we got some information here. This is real time. Okay, well, Cargian is an approved additive. Some people still have concerns about its safety. However, research is limited to verify these safety concerns. It's very limited. It's an inflammatory. Okay, so I guess
I'm going to make a note of this. It's very interesting. I have to say I haven't heard about it before, because there are tons of additives added to our food to make it taste better, to increase shelf life and whatnot. But I will look into it. And some of the information out there is factually accurate, and sometimes it's not. And so we just need to be careful here.
well, that's the kind of industry that we're in. There's so many types of additives that we're not even be able to keep track of all of them. So We'll take a look at that one, and we'll have you back for that one.
Absolutely.
Now back to the question before that. 30% fertilizer reduction, nitrogen. This came from global sources, Agriculture Canada. I had a conversation with them online about it. I was trying to find out, where did this number come from? Why is this a target? Why we focus on this? And does it have any yield impacts? So is it actually going to impact the yields for farmers? Because the messaging that's coming from them, this globalist whatever, is the farmers local here don't know what they're doing. So they need some sort of guidance. But from my experience, not only do they know what they're doing, it's right down to the kilo on how much they put where, on what acre, on what part. They know very well, farmers, exactly what they're doing with their fields. So why is it that there's some sort of global initiative to control things like fertilizer and water? We're seeing that happen a lot here in Alberta and BC as well. And we're not leaving it to the farmers. And then the federal government is not doing anything about it. They're actually ushering this in. So why are they not listening to farmers?
They're encouraging it for sure. Yeah.
So what's going on here?
They're brokering this globalist agenda, but they're really pushing it further domestically. It boils down to understanding agriculture and trusting farmers as stewards of the land. I mean, I've always believed that farmers were the first environmental stewards that we've ever had. And they're good at it. But if you don't understand farming, so why would you trust them when it comes to the environment? If you don't understand all the work that they're doing, why would you see them as great environmental stewards? I think that's really fundamentally the problem. And that's why we're seeing bad policies like the carbon tax, for example, the 30% target you just mentioned. It really it's just pushed down and say, you need to comply to save the planet as quickly as possible, or else we're all in trouble. And farming is the main problem here, or one of the main problems that we need to address as quickly as possible. You're producing food, but you're producing the wrong way. So
Right.
That's why I'm not surprised when I interact with farmers to see that the morale is not very strong, and there's a lot of hatred and a lot of hatred directed towards Ottawa right now because of that.
Mm-hmm. In Quebec, I think they were going to bring some tractors in a few months ago to protest a bit. Now, in Netherlands, we saw a really big pushback because there was a big push on the farmers talking about taking their land and regulating them, and they pushed back. Are you familiar with that situation? And
Oh
what's
yeah, it
looking
was
like?
actually in 15 different European countries. It's not just in yeah, so it was pretty massive in Europe, and as it was the same idea. I mean, it was all about bureaucracy and pushing targets that were unrealistic, not understanding or not appreciating the sustainable practices happening on farms at all. And so that's why I wasn't surprised. In Canada, I think people just most farmers, except for Quebec, because in Quebec you have to understand, Jason, there is a union there, and the union is incredibly well organized. In the Rock and the rest of Canada, farmers aren't as well organized. It's actually quite fractured. There are so many groups that they can't really get organized as well as in Quebec. So, but I do feel that there's a lot of anxiety and anger directed towards Ottawa because of this huge misunderstanding. And we talked about the rural-urban divide earlier tonight. That just grew even more under the Trudeau regime. It just didn't want to listen to any groups at all, and it just wanted to implement because it was a we know it better, we know best sort of approach, and farmers will need to comply because what you've been doing the last decades or several decades is wrong.
And in Alberta, and I think you've been in the Lethbridge area, so you might be familiar with this. There's a large farming community down there. And during the convoy, we had trucks and tractors and coots dealing with the issue.
Yeah.
So the farmers are willing to push back if they believe they need to, and they stood up for that issue. Now, I've heard a lot of rumblings that we may see something similar going forward if 293 continued. We may not see that now. But would you be surprised if farmers started to protest in Canada against things like 293?
Surprise. It's just, I mean, it takes time. It takes energy. I mean, I've spoken to the Cattlemen's Association, the Cane Meat Council. They're all exhausted. I mean, they're because every single time Ottawa has found a reason to get into a fight with farmers. Whether it's labeling meat that has too much fat, whether it's emission targets, the carbon tax, and I mean I can go on and on and on. There every month there was something that came up that became a battle, and farming groups always played defense. It was never about growth. It was never about opportunities. They were always playing defense, and it got exhausting. So that's why I think a lot of people are hoping for change in Ottawa, because I think farmers are just tired. And so if you're tired, are you willing to go out and fight and go out with your tractor and express your frustration so people know? I'm not sure about that. So that's why, I mean, you'll do that if you have a chance of being listened to.
Right.
But the Trudeau government never wanted to listen.
Now we're looking at possibly a change in government coming soon. Trudeau stepping down. We'll get a new leader there, but possibly a new leader for Canada as well in the next election. Do you think the Conservatives will take a stronger approach to our food supply? Are they going to bring another bill similar, or are they going to step back? What is your assumption on what may happen with a Pierre Poilievre government?
This is what I think is going to happen. So will the Conservatives win? I don't know. But if they do, I would say that the focus will be on growth. The focus will be on working in lockstep with the new administration in the United States. And if you listen to Donald Trump, okay, his regime, his administration will be about efficiencies. It will be about reducing bureaucracy. It will be about empowering businesses, all the things that are at odds with what's happening in Canada. In the US, their GDP per capita is growing. Ours is shrinking. The gap has never been bigger between the two. They're creating wealth. We're making people's poor. And so to actually change direction, you need to actually understand your number one client. And that number one client is the United States. You need to work with the United States. One thing. Two, I expect a reduction in bureaucracy. And when you add 100,000 public servants in Ottawa, it will slow things down. If you invest in public administration, it will eventually slow things down. So I do think that there will be some measures there and some programs that will be cut, of course. Thirdly, corporate welfare. There's way too much of it. I mean, I'm an academic. I can tell you right now, there's tons of money being poured into academia because, and this is going to be harsh, I actually think that the Trudeau government since 2015 has decided to buy academia. And you see that in Alberta, by the way, with some academics out there on social media claiming all sorts of things, that the carbon tax is working, it's not hurting people, it's making our economy stronger, blah, blah, blah. These voices have been bought and paid for by Ottawa indirectly through institutes like the Smart Prosperity Institute in Ottawa, like the Canadian Climate Change Institute as well. Those are institutes heavily funded by Ottawa to support one narrative and one narrative only. That comes at a cost. People have not been allowed to have debates anymore about the economy. And so I do think that a Poilievre government will put an end to that. And that's going to save us a whole lot of money. And of course, when you do that, you give more attention to the real people who can support our economy. And those are entrepreneurs. Those are the ones really creating jobs, not Ottawa.
No, that's a good assessment for sure. Now, before we move over to our supporters area, Trump has been mentioning economic force. He was asked if he was going to try and take over Canada with military force, and his response was, no, I'm going to do it with economic force. Now, we've heard about tariffs and other things like that, but what could this mean to our food supply, exporting, importing? Like, what could this mean if there is some sort of economic force that he's attempting to do on Canada?
This is, I mean, I find it fascinating to see legacy media just chew it all up. They're chewing it up. I would say that I'm listening mostly to American media to understand Americans. And I mean, the comments that I'm hearing from American analysts are just priceless. It's just incredible. This morning, I actually saw a U.S. congressman say that Trump is more popular in Canada than Trudeau.
That's probably true.
And it's probably true. But can you imagine, Jason, can you imagine hearing someone saying that on CBC?
No.
Like, no way. There's no way. But it's true.
No.
And you can see, and of course, we know that Doug Ford and your own premier, Daniel Smith, is actually out there interacting with American media. We've never been able to decode America. A lot of Canadians claim to understand America, but they don't. First of all, Trump is not America. Okay. Trump is Trump. He doesn't represent Americans or the United States of America. He actually represents the presidency of the United States, which is a high office. I grant that, but he is the president. He's not the Americans. So that's one thing. If you talk to Americans, they've gotten accustomed to the rhetoric, the noise, the threats, and everything else. But Trump is no idiot. He knows what he's doing. Okay. Now, verbally, he'll probably say whatever like pops out into his head and will say it, but he does it on purpose. He wants to provoke. He wants to put people on edge, and it's working. It's working. So I would say, I mean, for the agri-food sector in Canada, a 25% tariff would be devastating. So We sell for $42 billion worth of food to the United States every year. That's a quarter of the entire agri-food sector in Canada. It's huge.
Wow.
Okay. But I don't think it's going to happen. I actually think that by doing so, he will penalize Americans. He will penalize Canadians as well. And so I do think it's part of a grander strategy that involves China, that involves Mexico. And if I were Poilievre, the government in waiting, I would certainly try to make sure that I am in the US for January 20th for the inauguration. I would make sure that I am in India to try to, build ties with India, because we all know what's going on there. Same for China. I basically made some efforts diplomatically to reconnect with these nations and focus on priorities, making sure that Trump understands who Poilievre is and not just Trudeau. Because right now, the face of Canada is Trudeau, and he's gone. He's gone. So we need a new face. And we all know that the next prime minister will be there for probably a few weeks, and that's it. And so if that's the case, you want to be out there and connect with an office like the presidency of the United States, so he can start putting a face and understand some person, not talk to Trump, of course, but to talk to his delegates in his cabinet.
Yeah, I don't think Trump respected Trudeau ever. So I think that some of his trolling was funny, and I do think he's doing a lot of trolling right now. I don't.
Oh, of course, because it's working.
It is.
It is working, but I mean, keep in mind. I mean, when he went to Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Trudeau did line itself up for some trolling by saying to Trump that if he is to implement a 25% tariff, our economy would collapse. I mean, that's not something you want to say, I think. I mean, it's important to make the president realize that it's a mistake for Americans, not just for Canadians.
Well, 2025 will definitely not be boring. It's going to be an interesting year. We'll be paying
exactly. But I do think, I mean, here's a bold prediction. I actually do think that there'll be a rapprochement between the United States and China because of, I mean, I've always find it fascinating for Trump to be very, very open to TikTok, and everyone else is panicking around TikTok and privacy issues and surveillance and intelligence through TikTok is our security is being compromised. But Trump has never actually been bothered by that, and I do think that if you're looking at developing different markets, if you're looking at selling, and I'm thinking about soybeans and corn in particular, and that's a big deal for Americans, you want to get along with China. And the best thing to do for your economy is to get along with other nations. And I think he's going to start doing that over the next 18 months or 2 years.
Well, we'll be paying attention, and we'll be having you back to see how he's doing. We'll do a Trump report card with you at one point, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so hold on. We're going to go visit our supporters in a minute, but we'll say goodbye to the public.
Okay.
So on that note, please go and share this out, everybody, and get this message out because it's important. Our food supply. Did you not know that it doesn't come from the grocery store? There's a supply before that. And thank you very much for Dr. Providing this information to us today, because it is important that we pay attention. Yes, Bill C-293 is basically on life support. Probably won't pass, but it was really important to see what they were trying to do. Alternative protein, what does that mean? That means crickets, things along those lines. And what are they trying to say? Our food supply would be attacked during a pandemic, swine flu, bird flu, all the flus at the same time, mad cow even, let's get it all in there. No protein, we need alternative protein. It was something I'm paying attention to, and I'll pay attention to with the next government as well, because they're up to something. They're trying to do something, and I don't think that Pierre is going to drop the bill. He may drop this version of it, but there's going to be something else. There's going to be something else that comes forward. So let's pay attention to that. So public, thank you very much for hanging out with us. Make sure you take care of yourself and your family. You shake the hand of a neighbor or a stranger. And why to remind you to do that? It's because I love you all very, very much, and God bless.